Hello and welcome to Halloween again. This is Pennywise the Clown from It. Now I'm just starting with the usual 2 coats of acrylic paint. With this one I used Naples yellow light for the little boat. I used any red, white, cadmium orange, black, and I made a little grey for the gutter. And here he is all done and painted. Now to get to the pastels. Using Paynes Grey Tint 7, I start to get into all the creases and that on his clothes and dirty him up a little bit. And now using neutral grey, I go over the same areas on his clothes just to darken them a little bit, making layers. Don't forget to do the shadows on the cat if you want the cat to be white. If you want it to be black, then you need to change the color, obviously. And now I start to do the hair. I'm using orange extra dark to go over the lines and try and give it a little bit more depth. This print doesn't have as many lines as some of the other models that I printed out, so it's a little bit difficult to get some of the depth and make character in the hair, but give it a go anyway. And using orange pan pastel, I just go over the hair again, just blending in those dark lines that I just went through. And it's time to go over the balloon with permanent red. And I decide to use a little bit lighter grey on his face, so I choose Paynes Grey Tint 7. Because he has a dirty face, but it's not as dirty as his clothes. And to go over all the darker creases on his clothes, like the little things on his arms, I use neutral grey Tint 8. With this model, some of those little arm thingies are hard to get to without maybe accidentally breaking off the balloon, and I didn't particularly want to do that, so I couldn't get to some on the inside arm. Just darkening some shadows in between where his fingers are. There's always shadows, and where his shirt is and the inside of his shirt and under his hand there and on it. And on his super trendy little frill there on his suit, just going over everything with that same grey, making it darker. And now to use permanent red and go over all the red that's on his face and on his clothes. And now using my left hand, because the bird is on my right hand, I use white to start blending in the grey that we've just done. And now to go over all the creases again, I'm using neutral grey extra dark too. Now I don't like to start off too dark with any of the colours unless you know you're going black, because once you go dark it's hard to fix it if you don't like it. So I like to build up the layers and get to the colour that I want, and then if I need to go a little bit darker. So that's why sometimes I start with a light grey and then go to a darker grey, or a light red then go to a darker red, because once you've gone dark it's very hard to fix it. And there have been numerous times where I have gone too dark and I've had to throw it away. And don't forget to do the cat and the inside of his ears as well, and all his little creases and shadows. Just putting this darker grey around the shadows and the creases on his face. I don't want it on all of his face because it'll make his face too dirty. And now back to the hair, using orange shade. I go over the whole lot. Now this whole layer is an exact repeat of the previous two, so just using white to blend everything together. I use a darker grey to go over all the creases on his clothes and some of the creases on the cat and the shadows on his hands, and permanent red for the balloon and orange or orange shade for his hair. So now I'm just trying to get some more depth in their hair because it just looks very flat. So I'm using an orange watercolor pencil just to try and do some lines, and I'll use darker orange and lighter orange just to try and get some variation in his hair. And I use white for the highlights. And now back to the orange extra dark to do the shadows in his hair, just trying to add some more depth and the shadows obviously. And now using neutral grey Tint 8 just to go over the cat, just trying to make the cat a little bit darker so that I can make some white fur, if that makes sense. And now using watercolor pencils, so this is a darker grey, I'm going through and doing some hair, just trying to get some different coloured hairs in there to try and give the cat a little bit of depth. And then using that same pencil, I do a couple of hairs in the hair of Pennywise, and then I go back to the orange coloured pencil and do some more hairs. And I'm just going over all the red again with the permanent red pan pastel. And now I've got permanent red extra dark, and I'm going to do the shadows on his pom-poms and on the marks on his face and on all the little rope thingies on his clothes and also on the balloon. If you look at a reference picture of Pennywise, you'll see that he has all these cracks on his head, so that's what I'm drawing here with a dark grey pencil. And just adding more shadow to the balloon with permanent red extra dark. The bottom of the balloon is going to be in shadow. And just going over his face here again with that lighter grey. And so I haven't really slowed this layer down because it's exactly the same as what I've done before, all those layers. The only thing different is I get a dark red pencil and draw in some of the lines on the ropes or the frills or whatever they are around his clothes. That's the only thing I do different. And so now I start to do the gutter. I use neutral grey extra dark 2 just to make it darker and give it some of the lines or patterns that concrete would have, because concrete isn't flat. It's very, well, some is, but most of the time it's got lines and things. And now using black, I do the creases on the concrete and all the parts that are going to have the darker shadows. And just using a grey pencil to go over those lines on his head again, and then I get a red pencil and go over the lines on his face as well, his mouth and eyes and that. And using Paynes Grey Tint 7, I darken the cat just a little bit more so that I can put some white hairs on it. And now just using that white watercolor pencil to draw in some white hairs. I'm just trying things. I really am just trying things. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. Sometimes I just try something, and if it doesn't work, I go over it again. So I just wanted the cat to be white, but in order for it to be white, you have to make the cat darker. And just adding some darker hairs with a darker grey pencil just to make some variation in the fur. Just doing another layer of the cat here using the Paynes Grey Tint 8, I think it is, Paynes Grey Tint 7, and then using the white pencil to do some more white hairs. So it's just another layer, just trying to get the layers in to give it a good look. And now using the different colours of orange pencils to try and get some more layers and depth into his hair. And I just used the orange pan pastel to go over his hair again and blend it together. And all I'm doing here is just final touches. Anything I see I don't like, I fix up. If it needs more shadow, if it needs more white, if it needs more blending or more lines, that's all I'm doing here. Just using yellow oxide and yellow oxide tint to do the shadows and the highlights on the paper boat, and then I get a black pencil and I write SS Georgie. Now his eyes are orange, but this model is so tiny, it was really difficult to get in there and get the eyes orange, so I did my best, but yeah, it was really difficult. So usually the last layer or the last 2 layers is just me going over and fixing up things I don't like, making shadows darker, making highlights lighter, just fixing up everything. So using the same colors and just going through and doing it all over again. And so for the first time ever, I'm actually using the Vallejo water texture to make water, because it's a rainy day, and so I just put water texture all over where I think it's going to be wet. Tried to make some little drips coming from the top of the gutter there, and it actually worked. So I just went over the whole thing with the water texture because the whole thing is wet really, and I wanted it to have the wet look. And when I say thing, I meant gutter, not the clown. And now back to the good old UV resin and just trying to do some drool because Pennywise likes to drool. And then I also put some, making them look like raindrops on the gutter. I also cover the red balloon with resin because the balloon is shiny and glossy, so I wanted it to look shiny and glossy, so I put resin on it. So I made drops on the drain or the gutter and on the paper boat, and a couple on the cat. And thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy this Halloween Pennywise.